Hi, it's Dan from Eujuicers.com, and today I'm going to take a first look at the new Omega twin gear juicer. Now, Omega is known mostly for their single auger juicers, both horizontal and vertical, and this is their foray into the world of twin gear juicers. Normally, you'd look at the Green Star by Kempo, or maybe the Angel, which is more of a premium price product. But Omega's got a design here that's similar to their horizontals. And inside you'll see it's completely different. It's a twin gear juicer. Now in this you've got two small gears, I'm going to show them to you in just a moment, that are grinding things, crushing them very finely. There's some pluses and minuses to a twin gear. The quality of the juice is the main advantage though, and the yield. You'll get more juice and you'll get a slightly higher quality. You know, there's a big step from a centrifugal to a horizontal or a vertical auger-driven juicer. It's like going from a C in school to an A. Going to here might get you from a little better, that A to an A plus, slightly better. On the other hand, as you'll see when I juice it, it can be a little more difficult. You're pushing things, especially bigger things like carrots, into a very small space. You need some force. You need to work out a bit. Well, I'm anxious to try it. I've never worked with one of these besides the Angels. And I'm curious to see how Omega's done with this. So I'm going to disassemble this, show you the parts, and then we'll get to juicing. So here's what comes in the box. First of all, there's a user's manual. It'll teach you all about assembly, usage of it. There's two different plungers. There's a wooden plunger and a plastic plunger. And they're really interchangeable. The advantage to the wooden is it will go a little farther in. It'll go all the way down to the gears, whereas the plastic has a little lip there that prevents it from getting caught in the gears, but that can help if you've got a little piece of carrot or something stuck in there. There's an unlocking tool. This will actually fit right around if you need to open this thing up. Sometimes after a lot of juicing, maybe it can get stuck on there. Little bits of fiber, especially celery, things like that, could get it stuck. There's a cleaning brush. There is a coarse juicing screen along with an encasing for it. I'll show you the fine juicing screen in a moment. Here's the juice container, along with the filter, or the little sieve, to sort out some of the bigger bits of apple or something that might get through. And finally, your pulp container. Let me open this thing up, and you'll notice the design, first of all, kind of looks like a typical Omega or Sana horizontal juicer. Has the same design, even the same tube here, but inside it's really different. It opens up just like a horizontal. You've got a locking collar, and you have this piece that has a pulp regulator at the end. I'll talk about that later. And then the twin gears are actually in this housing. Let me pull them out. Notice this fine screen, coarse screen, both in this plastic kind of housing unit. And then you have the gears themselves. They have to be lined up in a certain way, and there's some red dots, two on one on here, and they show you exactly how to line up so you can get these gears perfectly aligned. That's going to put a real tight fit so they can really crush things well. Also worth noting, it is available in two colors, red and silver, and this pops off just like in a horizontal single auger juicer. You've got your hopper up here. Feeding tube's a little smaller than some of the horizontals. We'll see how that works out. And that's what I'll do next. I've got some fruit, some vegetables, some leafy greens lined up. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with grapefruit. Now most juicers should be able to handle citrus okay. This should be no exception. And I also wanted to point out there is a pulp regulation control here. It's basically a spring-loaded device. You'd have it tighter for things like root vegetables and maybe leafy greens. Definitely looser for something like citrus, because citrus has such a high juice content. So it's handling the citrus just fine. as I expected. It is kind of cool. Most twin gear juicers, in fact, all that I know of, don't have a clear tube here. So you can see what's going on in there. We'll have some detail shots where you can see that. You can see the two gears grinding together. Also notice things are moving really fine. So I'm going to tighten up this pulp regulator a bit. All that does is increase the yield, puts a little back pressure on it, and you can just play with it. It's analog. Till if things start backing up, you'd want to loosen it up again. But it's just going to get you more juice. I can see it's not flowing through quite as well because I tightened it up too much, and open it up a bit, there it comes back out. So there's the last bit. Just let it run, clean up a bit. And it handled the citrus just fine. It was fast. And there we go. One thing with grapefruit juice, some people don't like it because it's a little bitter. And the way to get around that, when you peel your grapefruit, make sure to get all the rind off. If you get bits of that white part of the rind, that's where a lot of that bitterness comes from. I know some people like to put a bit of sugar or honey in as well. That's juice number one. And going to move on to number two. So next up is carrots. Now, twin gear juicers have a reputation for making a really high quality juice and also the highest yield of juice. You'll get the most juice out of it. But there's also kind of a other side with carrots and apples. Because you're going into such a small gear, there's such a small area that's grabbing it, it can be difficult for carrots. You might have to use some force. I've used an angel before and found that to be the case. Curious to see how this works here. Like I said, you'll get a really good quality of juice, but maybe a lot of work. Notice these, I'm going to shut that off so you can hear me a little better. Notice these have been cut thinner. I'm not putting whole carrots. I use a horizontal juicer. I shove whole carrots in there. It's got a bigger feeding tube. This is going to work better with smaller slices of carrots. Let me try it out. Yeah, I'm having to push some. I can also play around with the pulp regulator if I want to get a higher yield. It's going to create some back pressure. There's a bit of impacted carrots right there. I'm going to switch to the wooden plunger because that can go all the way in if I want to really force them. Yeah, perfect. If I really want to force them into the gears. So I'm going to stick with this wooden plunger. A couple of things I'm noticing. Like I said, I juice carrots almost every day with a horizontal juicer, a Sauna 707. The pulp is definitely drier here, more of a powdery finish or consistency. I can even get it drier if I tighten this up. That's going to make it a little harder to push them through. So I've got it pretty tight, a little bit loose. Another tip, you'll notice if I put this whole thing in, I've got this part kind of bending around. Works okay if you're doing a solid carrot, but I've got these things sliced in half. So it's better to snap them and you can get the full force of pushing. Because it takes some effort. You're going into these little gears. It's not feeding like you would in a regular horizontal. Some people ask me, what to do with all this carrot pulp? Seems a waste. Some people suggest putting it in muffins and things, but I don't think that works because you're losing a lot of your sweetness, a lot of your juice content. We use it in our compost. Works great. We have a composter in our back garden, and it really adds to the compost. So it looks like a pretty clear juice, minimal amount of foam, and later on I'll be curious to try it. Next up is apples. These should be a little easier than those carrots. I had to work a little bit, push a little bit with those carrots. So if you're going to juice carrots every day, you might want to build up some muscles. Let's see how these apples go. I'm going to tighten up the regulation knob a bit just to get a little higher yield. Also, I'm having to push these in. The feeding tube on this twin gear is kind of small compared to what I'm used to on the Sana and Omega horizontals. So there is more prep beforehand. That's something to keep in mind. If you're used to cutting your apple into quarters, or maybe using one of those round apple slicers, they might not fit. I have to push this guy. You don't want to overdo it either. Now I am curious to see this pulp. I've noticed the pulp here, again, like those carrots, is pretty dry. Drier than with my horizontal, definitely. I am having to use a little more force, and it is kind of a pain squeezing these apples in. That's just a result of me not cutting them finely enough, some of them. But I'd say that's enough. It went well. The juice looks pretty clear. And yeah, that's pretty nice pulp, pretty dry. There's a little foam. That's natural with apples. Also, this is operating at 150 RPM. It's a little faster than a horizontal, which operates around 80, or definitely more than a vertical, which operates even more slowly. So that's going to give a little foam. When I do this at home, I put a strainer whenever I do apples, even with a slower juicer. All right, so there's the apples, and after this I'm going to clean it. I want to show you how to disassemble this, clean it. It cleans up pretty easily, and then up next will be grapes. So cleanup with a twin gear is going to be a little more complicated. Obviously you have more parts, but I think Omega's done a pretty good job of keeping it fairly simple. What I'm going to do is, here's my juice container. I'll just start putting things into the sink, dump my pulp out. And what I do, a couple of ways you can do it. You can pop off the end, or you can take the whole unit over. For the sake of the video, I'm taking the whole unit over. One nice feature, this hopper comes off, which isn't the case on mine. And this locking cap unscrews. This end cap comes off, and the gears slide right out. And to clean up is just a matter of rinsing your plastic parts off. Like with any juicer, cleanup is mainly rinsing, really. The only part you're going to really get in there is with the brush, is on your juicing screens. What I like to do, I'll fill my pulp or juicing container with water and start putting parts in there, and then get back to those, because that'll get most of the dirty bits off. It's actually pretty nice that that hopper came out. This part becomes a lot easier to clean. And really, the only kind of work you have to do is on the screen, and it's pretty clean. Not sure if you can see that. There's not much apple on there. And I'm just going to brush it off. Make sure you get the inside and the out. And that's about it. The only other tricky part is because you've got the flow regulator. I'll open that. That'll clear things up a bit. And I run water through this opening to get the last bits out. There's still a bit of apple impacted in there. Oh, it just all went out. So that's really it. Everything's cleaned up, rinsed off, ready to go with grapes. Next up, I've got some grapes here. Not much to say about this. They should juice pretty easily. And I've got the flow regulator pretty loose. No need to have a lot of back pressure because they're real juicy to start with. Interesting thing, I was playing around with a regulation knob here with a pulp regulator, and since it was flowing so easily, I decided to tighten it up, see what would happen if I'd get a drier pulp, because the first pulp came out pretty moist, and I actually did get a real, it's almost like a stick of grape skin there, pretty dry. But I tightened it too much, and I noticed it started backing up just a bit. So I opened it up to kind of speed things up a bit, but there's some skin backed up, and that's just from me. And it's one of those things, you just get used to it. You know with each fruit or vegetable what your pulp regulation setting should be at. And that should be enough of that. Looks nice, nice and clear. So last but not least is what I hear is the specialty of Twin Gears. I'm going to do some romaine lettuce. Curious to see how that turns out. Last thing I have here is romaine lettuce. As I mentioned before, Twin Gear juicers are known for their ability to handle leafy greens, not just lettuce, but things like spinach and, I don't know, all kinds of things. Stinging nettles. I've seen those being juiced. My wife likes to juice those or dry those. But this is some romaine lettuce that has a lot of moisture content. Now this, I've never juiced this before, so I'm curious to see how this works out. And if it self-feeds, if I'll need to shove it in, let's take a look. It's juicing pretty well. What I'm doing is folding them over so I can fit it in. And then I just push down with a little bit of force. And once those gears grab it, they're kind of pulling it in. One thing I'm noticing again is the dryness of this pulp. It's almost like a stick here. It's like sawdust almost. Really kind of coarse. Now these smaller leaves, the gears will actually pull them in. They'll do a little bit of self-feeding. Like it just grabbed that from me like a hungry kid. So as expected, it's doing a great job with this romaine lettuce. It's just chewing right through them. Like I said, I'm really impressed with this dryness of this pulp. It's just, like I said, almost like sawdust. All right, it's a nice dark green color. I really like that. So that's a look at Omega's new twin gear juicer. Like I said, it handled the leafy greens pretty well. Also did fine over here, but I'd say if you're really looking for juicing a lot of greens, spinaches, lettuces, and different vegetables, it's definitely a machine to keep in mind, a machine to consider. And that'll do it. If you need more information, come to our website. That's at Eujuicers.com. Thanks for watching. First juice, take two. First juice, first fruit. Most juicers should be, I'm a little Mimo today, aren't I? I think the thieves oil is getting to my head. I'm a little woozy. Is it running again? Yeah, suddenly, boom, boom, I teleported here. What do we have? Grapefruit, carrot, apple. Is that right? Let's do that again. Chill out.